Hello, sorry I look like death, although that's appropriate because what I was going to give you an update on is mummy costumes. I've been working on these for a while now. They're very labour intensive to make. It's a lot of sewing and I'm not the quickest sewer in the world. But I thought I'd show you what goes into them and how I make them, and then should you ever wish to make your own. Okay, so mummy costume, essentially we sew bandages onto something. I originally thought I could maybe use bandages, that seems obvious, but the problem is modern bandages, they're white, they're the way they're woven, they don't look antiquated, they don't look convincingly like they could have come off something that's been in a tomb for a long time, and I didn't think they'd take the dye very well or sew very well. So another alternative was just to buy fabric and cut it into strips, like a linen fabric, but that's really expensive and we need a lot of bandages. So I just looked out when I was searching Wilko's department store. I found this decorator rag fabric. It's actually sold by weight, not by length. It's very cheap, and you can cut this into quite convincing already aged looking bandages. Now I'm not going to lie, these are a massive pain in the arse to work with. They tend to coil in at the edges, they don't lie very flat. But in terms of getting the right look, they're fantastic. So they're my mummy bandages. I'll dye them with tea, coffee, Warhammer paint. There's, I think it's called Santari dust or Sandry dust, something like that. There's a spray can of, if you don't know what Warhammer is, it's kind of where weird teenage boys hang out. That doesn't really narrow it down, does it? It's a model making game. It used to be Games Workshop. It's a hobby shop. You can buy models and paints to paint the models. The guys there are really helpful. I went in and got some paint, so I could do things like stain the bandages with this base coat colour that ages them really nicely, but also paint things like this. And this is something I'm going to try and incorporate into one of the mummy costumes as a feature, so just sort of have the bandages across the front but revealing elements of the jaw. This was like an airsoft mask. It's black when I bought it, and I painted it with a mixture of different acrylic paints, including the Xandri dust from Warhammer, and it's come up really well. I'm quite pleased with that. Okay, so you have your mummy bandages, but you need to attach them to something, and this is where it gets tricky because I'm using mostly thermal underwear, so these really attractive thermal long johns, which I was actually sewing my first mummy, and I hadn't sewed up the, what do you call it? What's the polite way of putting it? The sort of dick hole in the front. Let's go with wee hole. I hadn't sewed up the wee hole, and postman came to the door. I was like waist down, mummified, but with a big gaping wee hole. This happens quite a lot, actually. It's one of the things they don't tell you about when you start making a short film. Your postman will see sights that no postman should see. Anyway, yeah, thermal long johns, similarly a thermal top. This I discovered is quite time consuming because it requires a lot of fabric to wrap it in bandages. One thing I've found as a shortcut is if you just use a big piece of the decorator's rag, sew that on, cut that, and then sew it back up. It looks like it's been wrapped, but it's much quicker. I don't want to do that for all of the mummy pieces because it looks a bit too uniform, but in terms of covering a large area, it helps. What also helps when I ran out of time when we shot one day in Brighton was I dyed the back of the mummy top just with, I think I just soaked it in tea for a while, the back and the arms, and then it didn't matter that I didn't have time to actually wrap the back or completely wrap the arms. I've gone back and redone the arms so they're a bit more covered, but actually the back, it's fine. It's fine for what it is. They're not so bad. The only real problem there is I don't own a dressmaking dummy, and trying to sew bandages onto stretchy thermal underwear is quite difficult. So I have to like put the trousers on and then sew myself into them, which is a bit problematic. It's terrible for my back, and it also means that whoever ends up playing the mummies as extras in the film have to be fairly small because I'm not particularly tall. It's a detail, but I don't own a dressmaker's dummy. I'm making this shit up as I go along, frankly. Yeah, feet, toe socks, also dyed in tea, and similarly for the mummy hands, we have these are just cheap work gloves. They still have the grip on the back. These will get completely, well, these will probably get completely wrapped in bandages. What I did do for the exterior shoot when I ran out of time was I just sprayed the backs brown so it wasn't too obvious, but then went back and filled them in later. So it really depends how frantic and desperate I am whether these get completely finished. But they look pretty good. Yeah, so basically sew a lot of fabric onto a lot of stretchy fabric. Oh yeah, the head. I forgot about the head. This is like a what do you call it? Like a balaclava. This is basically a balaclava designed for motorcyclists. Yeah, you pull it on, it keeps the wind out. It's complete nightmare to sew bandages onto because again you need to keep it in its sort of stretched out form, otherwise the bandages are too small and then you can't get it over your head. And believe me, once you've had your head stuck in a mummy hood and you can't see and you feel the first stages of a panic attack rising, it's not much fun. So I don't really have a solution for that other than try not to get your head stuck in a mummy. So yeah, one of my friends, Nick from the band Manaphora, had this idea that's kind of cheesy but cool, that you could put LEDs under the bandages to make glowing eyes. Ooh, spooky. So I've been playing with some LEDs and some batteries to figure out what the sort of minimal amount of batteries I can get away with powering a couple of LEDs. So hopefully we'll have some variety in the mummies. So we'll have the glowing eyes, we'll have the exposed jaw. The one that I made already has a bit of exposed breastbone, that was made from, well, the core was Fimo, the clay that you bake in the oven. Then I went over that with, it's called Mod Rock, but it's basically plaster of Paris in bandage form. And I used to play with that when I was a kid because my dad worked in A&E, so he would sometimes bring me a couple of rolls home. And when I was 13, I actually made a spaceship because I'm still a massive fan of Red Dwarf, particularly the first 4 series, and I wanted to make my own Red Dwarf. Well, actually mine was green, and because my dad's a good photographer, we put pinprick holes in the side and we put a torch inside, and so it looked like it was all lit up, and we put pinpricks in the black backdrop so they looked like stars, and that was like the most exciting thing I did as a teenager, and I don't care if that's not cool because I think it's cool. What was I saying? Oh yeah, Mod Rock plaster of Paris bandages. I use them to make a bit of fake breastbone that's protruding from one of the mummies. And again, going to the Warhammer store, they have paints that are called things like, I don't know, death, rot, leaking pus. Appropriate paints that they dry shiny, so they look kind of gooey and unpleasant. And you can also use a bit of, we had limited success with this, but I used a bit of latex, liquid latex stretched over the bony bits, just to add a bit of, what do they call it in the mummy film? Goo. It's a bit gooey looking, which is exactly what I'm going for. So anyway, that's the materials I'm using. I'll probably do a bit of time lapse, and there'll probably be further updates of me being incredibly stressed about how much my back hurts, and I apologise for that in advance. But there you go. I'm off to make some mummies. So latest in mummy experiments, I think I showed these last time, but I use just cheap working gloves to make the mummy hands, but I found these which are just black stick-on nails, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint them and scratch them up a bit so they're less perfect looking. I know it's a myth, but I like the story about how your nails keep growing after you die, so I was thinking when I bandage these up it'd be pretty cool to have a few nails busting through. Yeah, that's my definition of pretty cool. So because I don't have any sort of head dummy, the only way I could figure out the bandages is to actually wear the thing and pin the fabric on while I'm wearing it. Basically, if you need costumes making, I highly recommend you get a professional costume designer involved.